The next property of water that we are going to study is latent heat of vaporization. Well, first we need to remember what vaporization means. Well, vaporization is the conversion of a liquid into gas or vapors. Sometimes this word or this phenomena is also known as evaporation, but evaporation is all it's a very spontaneous process that occurs on its own due to the environmental temperature, and it occurs very slowly. But vaporization is a more general term that describes both the conversion of liquid into gas spontaneously and through boiling. So both boiling, process of boiling, and evaporation comes under the category of vaporization. And of course, when the liquid converts into the gaseous state, liquid has to absorb some amount of heat. So this some amount of heat that this liquid has to absorb in order to be converted into vapors is known as latent heat of vaporization. So, well, why does a liquid or why liquid has to absorb heat in order to be converted into vapors? Well, of course, if you look at this diagram, so look, vapors start forming at the top of the liquid. Of course, the molecules that are present on the surface, they get evaporated first, and then the molecules that are present below them. Now, if you notice, of all the water molecules, they have a bond with each other. Okay, so they have intermolecular forces with each other that keep them bound together, that keep them stick together. And the liquid molecules, they cannot be converted into gas molecules until they break these intermolecular forces. So, so of course, these intermolecular forces, they are strong hydrogen bonds in case of water molecules. So, in order to break the hydrogen bonds, we have to provide heat. So, when these liquid molecules, so sometimes we provide this heat ourselves when we, for example, boil the water. So, as you're providing heat, this heat will cause the breaking of these bonds between the water molecules. And water molecules, as their bonds will get broken with the other water molecules, they will leave the surface and will become vapors. So, this happens during vaporization. Sometimes water molecules, they absorb the heat from their surroundings when we don't provide the heat. So for example, they take the heat of the temperature and from the kinetic energies of the other water molecules, and by taking the kinetic energy from the other water molecules or by absorbing the heat from the surroundings, water molecules, they get evaporated by breaking the bonds. And because so in this case, when they're absorbing the heat from the surroundings, they become cold. So we can say that water, or the evaporation of water, or the vaporization of water, it causes a cooling effect. This is of great significance for organisms who have to maintain their body temperature, especially as humans. So I've given this example before too, in terms of high heat capacity of water, that it has to absorb large amount of heat in order to get evaporated. And once it gets evaporated by absorbing the heat, so of course if the sweat is present on our skin, so water present in the sweat, it will absorb the heat from the body, and when it will absorb the heat from the body and then leave the surface of the body, it will cause a cooling effect in the skin. And this cooling effect, it will lower or the temperature of the body as compared to the surrounding or the temperature of the environment. Because you guys have noticed that we produce sweat, of course, when there is very hot temperature outside. So when there is hot climate or hot weather, that is, when we produce sweat. And this sweat, it results in keeping our body cool in front of that hot climate or hot weather. And not only this latent heat of vaporization is is a significance. So water has a very high latent heat of vaporization. It means that it absorbs too much energy in order to get evaporated. So that is also significant because it will absorb too much heat energy from the skin. It will make skin a lot more cooler than any other substances would have done. The same effect is produced in plants when the plants transpire. So transpiration in plants is you can consider it as sweating of the plants. So leaves of the plants, they release water molecules from their stomata that is present in the lower epidermis of the leaves, and few water molecules are also transported from the upper epidermis too, but they are very fewer. And this latent heat of vaporization, so this is also very significant. So it needs a very high temperature to, cause this water in the leaves to get, vaporized. It means that plants can conserve more and more water in terms of transpiration, because if, plants, they would just vaporize the water even at lower temperatures, then plants will lose too much water. But now, because water has higher heat vaporization, it means that it needs a much higher temperature for the plants to lose much water. So it reserves the water for the plants.